this is my development plan for West Pageboro. Now, as we all know, the problem in West Pageboro stands today that we're all going to have a major problem when this new population spike increases. Now, when this happens, the local population is going to be doubled, tripled, maybe even quadrupled. So how are we going to cope with this? Well, that's what this development plan is aimed to doing. Now, when this population increase happens, these humans are going to need much more than what they're intaking now. They're going to need more land, they're going to need more resources, more food, more activities, more space, more homes, and that's exactly what we need to focus our development plan on. In addition to this is going to have negative impacts on animals. So what this development plan does is it's going to try to create a symbiosis between both the humans and the animals, in which both of these organisms can live together for the next 20-30 years and both of them can prosper. Now, as I said before, the main problem here is that when these humans come in, we're going to have a large amount of land being cut down. For example, we have a town in Ohio in 1984 in which the population spiked 5 times. Now, this is a picture of this town. This man was a local farmer in this town, and what happened to this man was he had absolutely no land for him to do his crops on. Additionally, when we have something like this occurring, all these houses take all of the space for organisms. So the entire forest habitat in this area, as you can see, is destroyed. This means these animals are going to get killed off, disease is going to spread, the carrying capacity is also going to go lower, and this is our job to help preserve instances like these. Now, as you can see on our map of West Pageboro, we have many different types of lands. Now, on this map, as you can see, we mostly have forests and water, but as we can see, the majority of this land is forest. This also means that most of the land that's going to be cut down is also forest. So in this forest habitat, every single one of these animals is being put to some sort of danger. We have the black bear, the chickadee, the raccoon, and the mouse. What I believe is going to happen most severely, the most damage is going to happen to the black bear. Now, this is because the black bear sits at the highest trophic level, meaning the least amount of energy is going to come to this trophic level. So when we have an already reduced amount of raccoons and chickadees, this means that very, very few black bears will be able to truly survive. However, I have a different fate for both the mouse, raccoon, and the chickadee. These animals all have the ability to adapt to the new scenarios and the new places in which they're going to live in. For example, a mouse can easily live in the basement of a house that humans live in. The raccoon can often easily feed on the trash and all the native people living here. And the chickadee, when we build these new trees near these homes, we can also help give the chickadee a new environment. A major problem, as we can see in the map of West Pageboro, is that there's very little forest edge, there's very little grasslands. As we know, grasslands are flat lands, and this means that many people want to build their homes on grasslands. So it's essential that we protect grasslands in order to protect the organisms that are living here, because these organisms are going to be the most endangered when this new West Pageboro development plan happens. Also, in the wetlands, we're going to have a number of recreational activities, rowing, picnics. Families are going to come here for lunch and they're going to celebrate with their families. And what this is going to do is this is going to disrupt the native ecosystem that's here. We can help solve this problem by protecting this wetland area to try to give these organisms a chance for the future to survive. Now, a big aspect that we need to take into consideration when we're stopping this hunting and all protection of animals is the culture of these people. Many cultures in the American culture actually like to hunt animals. Now, this means, this is a common slogan, is hunting deer. Now, as you saw earlier, deer was on our endangered species list. So if we have something like deer that's already endangered and then is being threatened by humans, this is a huge risk and the deers can possibly go extinct. We can help solve this problem by putting even more protection on these deers by creating laws and law enforcement to help protect the deer in its natural habitat. Now the first phase, as you can say, in my development plan has to do with homing. When we have a large number of people that are going to come into this area, essentially what we need to do is give them houses. However, do we really have what it takes to home all these 103,000 new people? So that's why we need to make something called apartments and condos. Instead of growing horizontally by building more houses, by expanding even more, we should build vertically. Now by building vertically, not only are we going to save a huge square feet in area of space, we can also help these animals not meet these humans. This is going to mean that the animals and the human symbiosis can be preserved because they won't actually be in contact. Thus, by building apartments like this, we're going to have animals not be in contact with humans because the humans are going to be in these tall apartment buildings, not spread out. Now, near these apartment buildings, we can also set up grasslands, we can set up trees, and not only will these beautify the apartments themselves, they're going to give the animals a brand new ecosystem to live in. Also, what we need to do is we need to build houses in the same area. So by building houses in the same area, we're taking less land away from these animals. This means these animals can maintain their ecosystems and maintain where they're living, and they can start prospering in the future. Now, as you can see here, we have a typical condo apartment-like style. So instead of growing horizontally, these houses themselves take the same amount of area as an average house would. But instead of fitting one family, we're fitting 20, 30 families in the same sort of building. Now, why would we want to sacrifice the land that it takes to build 5,000 houses, to build these huge developments, when we can build these apartment buildings and house even more people, get even a greater revenue from these people, and also help preserve animals? As you can see on the side here, we have a tree. Now essentially what these trees and all are going to do is they're going to provide a way for animals to still live in these places. This tree could be home to a chickadee, like I said before. So we should not take into account, we should also take into account that even when these ecosystems are destroyed, they're going to still be trees, there's still going to be grasslands in which these organisms can live. Now a key part in building this community is giving these people an option to go out, buy things, help their own economy, and help grow their community itself. And a big part of this is establishing shopping centers for these people. Now as you can see, in one of our development phases, we're going to implement shopping centers into this new West Pageborough. We often have to think of the residents' needs, and a big need of residents is the ability to build markets, supermarkets, malls, all of these different things which are going to help these people increase their lifestyles. Now what we want to do is put shopping centers in the same areas as homes. Essentially what this is going to do is allow people to walk outside their houses and go to shopping centers that are nearby. Not only will this help the people, it will help the animals too. We have to think about the fact that the people and the animals are going to be separated. So if we build shopping malls away from where the people are living, we're also going to be taking more and more land away from these natural organisms' habitats. So by doing this, the shopping malls in the same places as these houses, we're taking away the risk of the animals dying because they are exposed to more and more human interactions. What we want to do is establish malls instead of individual shops. Now the purpose of this is we're going to have less pollution because people aren't going to have to use their cars to go from one store to another store. Also, we're going to have less space required because it takes a much larger space to take individual malls. That's going to take a much larger square area than, let's say, we just take one huge shopping mall, which is going to take a certain plot of land, and the other lands can be undisturbed and can be given to the animals. Lastly, as I said before, we're going to let communities and shops be nearby. Now, as you can see over here, we have a graph of when populations grow, the amount of money, the amount of revenue that is generated. Now over here we have the world GDP. So we can apply international economics into this small town. Now as we can see, the world GDP increased as the population grew. What does this tell us? The more people that enter this native habitat, the more money we're going to get into this area. Often, also, as you can see, we're getting more CO2. The red line on this graph represents CO2. So we're getting even more CO2. This means that when there are more people, studies show that there's more carbon dioxide given into our atmosphere, and that's something that we really need to fix. Also, as you can see, there's much more oil consumption, and this means that we're going to have to rely on our ecosystem for even more natural resources. Now, a big part of development is gates. Now, I would just like to talk about a brief experiment for a while. I believe it was Iowa in 1987, this man, John, I forgot his last name, I think it was John Smith or something, he decided to build a natural reserve in which he would house these animals. And what he wanted to do is he wanted to make a test. If we gate this whole natural reserve, will the animals inside be affected? So if we completely let these animals be completely undisturbed by humans, will the animal populations decline? Will the carrying capacity decline because they're fixed in one small place? Now, what we proved after this experiment was rather than the animal populations declining, they were remaining stable. Now, by implementing this same idea in our town of West Pageboro, we can keep these ecosystems gated off, and essentially they're going to stay at a level in which they are still stable. So all we really need to focus on is keeping these organisms stable. We don't really want them decreasing or increasing. We want to keep our carrying capacity the same, and that's exactly what gates allow us to do. We prevent pollution from coming in. We prevent humans from coming in and shooting these animals, and that's a big part in preserving the animals of this nation. Of this town, sorry. Also, what this does is these gates are protecting these animals from roads. A common example is deer in headlights. We don't want animals to be exposed to cars. If the animals are exposed by cars, they could easily be hit, they could die. And that's something that we don't want to have in our town. We also want to put gates around residential neighborhoods. What this is going to do is this is going to prevent human and animal interactions. And what these interactions do are they kill the animals because they are exposed to more humans. They are killed and the humans take their space. With these new gates, we are essentially blocking out residential people, residential neighborhood from these animals' locations, and this allows the animals to live in peace without any human interaction. Now, as you can see from the map of West Pageboro, which I'm about to show you right now, we also have a very, very small amount of this forest edge habitat. Now, as you can see on the screen right here, most of this is covered in forest. These are all forest. There's very few forest edge. These light green areas are actually grassland. So as you can see in this map as a whole, we don't really have that many forest edges. So while it's apparent to us that we don't really have forest edges in our town of West Pageboro, we need to answer the question, how are we going to get to the next level? For sustainability, how are we going to get to the level in which we can have a stable forest edge environment? So I believe that the key in doing this is by building them. And well, we're not actually building them. All we're doing is cutting down trees. Now, as we have a large abundance of forests in these lands, we can cut down a couple of these forests and help to make a stable forest edge ecosystem. Essentially, what this forest edge ecosystem is going to do, it's going to provide a stable environment for our forest edge organisms to live in. So we saw before, we had the deer, we had the red fox, and they're going to be displaced because of this development plan. Well, look no further, we have a forest edge right here. And as you can see, essentially how these people built this forest edge was by cutting down the forest that existed here. By cutting down this forest, what we have is we have a brand new area, a brand new ecosystem called the forest edge, in which we can have these organisms thrive, and we can have these people go to the next stage of development and try to have a new ecosystem within our town. Now, a lot of people are asking, where are we actually going to build new land? And while I said before we don't want to take too much away from a forest, we have a large amount of forest being protected. So in that land of forest that's not being protected, which I'll show you later on the map, we can start building these new areas. These new areas are going to be built around our residential areas. So this means, let's say we have a road, we have some forest, and we have a residential area. Why keep this forest in between a residential area and a road? We might as well just take a large residential area rather than little clumps of forest and residential areas. So essentially, these new buildings, these new offices, all these things are going to be around our residential areas. This is going to allow us to help make a more stable environment and help a large amount of land be set aside for these organisms, and so that they can prosper in their native habitats. New buildings, as I said, will be created in the forest area, and also new buildings will be in some sort of community or shape. What I mean by this, as I said before, is when we build them in this residential area, we're gonna have to give them a chance to be in other buildings just like them. Now, a huge part of every single town is recreation. What are our children going to do? What are we going to do in our free times? And that's the answers. Those are the questions that we need to answer as we go forward with this development plan of West Pageborough. So as you can see behind me, we have a picture of a common recreational area. Now we need to implement areas just like this in our everyday West Pageborough life. So for example, we can build community parks, and what we're going to do in these community parks is they're going to be living examples of when we have recreational activities and when we have animals coinciding together. Now an example of this is right here. We have shrubbery, we have grasslands, we have a natural field in which organisms can live, organisms can prosper. However, what we also have is a court. Alright, now this court serves as recreational activities for humans. So what we can do with this is we can provide humans with recreational activities in which they can play, they can do whatever they want, and they can also, at the same time, we can sustain the lives of these animals. As you can see on this court behind me, it does not just apply to one sport. We have tennis and we have basketball on the same exact court. Now by doing something like this, we're essentially saving land. And that's what our purpose is here. We're trying to make the least amount of land taken away from these organisms. And that's why I believe recreational activities such as the ones behind me are really what we need to invest in the future. Ecosystem services. As you know, almost every single ecosystem service you could think of was brought towards the town of West Pageborough and brought towards the ecosystems from our original natural resources. Examples of the main ecosystem services that are going to be affected by this development plan are regulation of atmospheric chemical composition. So this means that essentially when we cut down these trees, photosynthesis is kind of stopped, it's kind of slowed down a bit. It doesn't stop, but it's slowed down. So essentially what photosynthesis does is it recycles our carbon and our oxygen, and that allows us to breathe. Now this ecosystem service is huge, but when we cut down these trees, this ecosystem service is going to be slightly lessened. This means that there's going to be a lot more carbon dioxide in the air because these plants are not absorbing them. Also, we have waste treatment, pollution, chemical waste. All these things come about because of humans. When we have a dishwasher soap, when we have a chemical used for cleaning, where do these chemicals go? They go into something called chemical waste, and this chemical waste can destroy organisms anywhere. Pollution. Everyone knows that humans create trash, humans create air pollution, humans create every single type of pollution we can think of. And that's what this town is going to do. Also, recovery of mobile nutrients is slowed. So what this means is that the cycle of nutrients, nitrogen, all these things that have to go into our soil that allow these plants to grow and these plants to prosper, as we know plants are the basis of an ecosystem, all of these things are going to be slightly slowed down, and that's what's going to be a major effect for our ecosystem in the next 20 or 30 years. Also, biological control will be hampered. As I said before, organisms such as the black bear at these very, very high trophic levels compared to the low trophic levels, they're going to die out. They may die out because there's much less energy going into their trophic levels, and that's something that we really need to think about. Also, as capacitance, and this is basically just protection against storms. What trees do, they provide protections for animals against storm, against winds, against every single type of natural disaster that we face, and this is something that we need to think about in the future. So, we come up to the question, how do we really solve this? And that's exactly what this slide here does. So, how are we going to solve atmospheric chemical composition, the regulation of this? Well, what I propose is that we install chemical waste centers. So this means humans can go to these chemical waste centers, safely dispose of every single type of trash that they have, go on with their life. In Mercer County is an example of this. We have a national day every single 3 months in which everyone gets rid of their chemical waste at some plant. So what this does is this means that this chemical waste isn't going in contact with these animals, meaning these animals aren't just going to die out. So this allows our animals to live, and this allows our humans to safely get rid of trash. What we also want to do, we want to have our contractors plant trees. So when we build these houses, it's not just going to be flat. We're going to have trees developed, we're going to have trees in our backyards, and essentially these trees are going to help with recycling that CO2. Committees for both cleanup and animal protection during storms. What this is going to do is we're going to give animals the protections they need, whether it's a man-made disaster, natural disaster, and we can form committees, help services to do so. Committees for cleanup are essentially when we have a big storm, when man-made materials are flying everywhere, let's say a tornado, and all of these places, buildings are utterly destroyed, who's going to clean it up? And that's exactly what this question solves. Institute laws punishing criminals. So we often in our national parks have people that try to destroy our national parks, and what we have to do is we need to have strict laws, meaning that we're going to fine people, we're going to jail people if they disobey these laws. That means, let's say someone's hunting on a protected area. Well, we're not just going to let that person go away with a warning. We need to fine them. We need to do something to them that's going to make them learn their lesson and make sure that this does not happen in our town. Lastly, education. We have about one school, I think, one major school, high school in our town of West Pageboro. So in this school, we can make a course, environmental science, in which we can make this course mandatory and have every single student learn about what's going to happen to their own town so that they don't do it. Now, as important as it is for West Pageboro to develop itself, it's often important for West Pageboro to make relations. Now, we live in the United States. We might as well utilize the resources that we have. The United States Department of Homeland Security has created an organization many years ago called FEMA. Now, what does FEMA do? Well, let's look at Hurricane Sandy. When Hurricane Sandy struck, the problem was that the areas which it struck in did not have good relationships with FEMA. So what FEMA's purpose is to go into these foreign locations and help them build up. Now, let's say I represent a delegate representing West Pageboro. It's important for me to collaborate with someone from FEMA.
Hi, nice to meet you. Just to let you know, FEMA has West Pageboro under control.
Thank you, sir. Now, what a delegate like this can do is it can collaborate between West Pageboro and FEMA. So let's look at these radioactive wastes. No matter. FEMA's going to take care of them, FEMA's going to get rid of them, West Pageboro is fine. So there's essentially work that our nation does for us that we actually don't have to do ourselves. We might as well utilize these resources, and that's exactly what this part of our development plan is focused on. We're going to utilize the resources that we have in our backyard, in our nation, and we're going to try to incorporate them into our town as it stands. Now, after West Pageboro collaborates with FEMA and realizes that this development plan may be very good, but we might not need to tweak it a bit. Now, what we really want to focus on is transportation, human transportation. So what we want to do, we want to make more bike trails, more hiking trails, and we want to make them wider. Studies have shown that there's a 20% increase of people that utilize these resources if they're wider. So that means we have to maintain them, we have to keep them well-to-do, and we can also create jobs for this. So this is not only going to help our economy, this is going to help our sustainability for our community and for our animals. We also, as I said before, we need to create township laws, very, very firm township laws. That means if a criminal creates a crime, he's fined, he's put in jail, that's not our problem. That's really what we need to focus on. Judicial systems, we often need to make sure that we have a very, very strong judicial system in the town of West Pageboro, and that's going to help us go to the next level and help solve criminal acts like this. In conclusion, these development plans will help to cope with the anticipated spike in population found in the West Pageboro area, and and this is going to help us increase our productivity for the next 20-30 years while sustaining our animals, making sure trophic levels are fine, keeping our carrying capacities where they should be, and overall this is going to create a much more stable town for all of us. Thank you for your time, thank you for your attention, and this PowerPoint could be forwarded to you. All you have to do is ask. Thank you.